I'd like everybody to give a warm welcome to Stephen Green.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I covered the Capitol for the Union Tribune for a few years, and I'm back to writing a column for the Orange County Register, where I spent most of my career, and I get my paycheck from a think tank, a free market think tank called the Arch Street Institute. And anyway, thanks for having me. It's nice to be here. It's May Day, right? So we're all celebrating the Communist International. Actually, a friend of mine has proposed the Victims of Communist Day on May 1st, which I think would be a lot more fitting, right? But anyway, good to be here. I like to use a story. You remember those programs, the Scared Straight programs, where you take at-risk youth, which is one of my favorite terms, at-risk youth, and you take them to the jails or the prisons, and you scare them straight, and then they don't misbehave, supposedly. It's just another stupid program like everything the government does. But I think we ought to have a Scared Straight program for people at the state legislature. Everybody ought to go into, you're allowed to go into the gallery there and watch the legislators in action and listen to what they actually say, and then you might be scared into realizing, pay a little more attention to what we vote for. And we don't see enough of that. But I get to cover the Capitol. I was on the Sacramento Press Club board, and I was a member of the press corps, so I used to watch them and interview Governor Brown, and anyway, you get to listen to what the folks say. So it's always a good reminder to do what you folks are doing and actually pay attention to what's going on. And what's that? No, that wouldn't be it. Not Chris Matthews here, but he's an entertaining character, we'll say that. I don't agree with most of what he's done, but anyway, he's interesting. So Capitol's obviously only an hour down the road, and might as well be on Mars, because when you listen to the debates in the Capitol and you talk to regular people, there's a pretty large disconnect, and we could discuss maybe later what some of the solutions are. And part of the problem is there are a declining number of solutions. And I've covered the whole Jefferson movement. I've been up in Siskiyou, and I see a good old Jefferson hat there. In fact, I fly the Jefferson flag from my ranch in South Sacramento County, so that's kind of enemy territory. My neighbors are always like, why don't you fly the American flag? I'm like, well, I'm a states' rights guy, and I support a state that doesn't even exist, so we'll just keep flying that flag. And I keep trying to, impress upon a lot of my conservative friends. I talk to liberal groups too, which is, look, I meet a lot of nice people in liberal groups. I just don't understand where they're coming from. I really don't understand it. I disagree with them. I'm a libertarian. I disagree with conservatives on a number of things, but at least they're like in the real world. We can at least have a discussion based on some semblance of facts. I was speaking at a group in Berkeley, and I'm at a table, and they're starting to say nice things about Fidel Castro. I'm like, it's probably time for me to leave. Because I don't have blood pressure medicine, but I'm sure I would need some if I hung around. So I was just, I guess I'll probably just ramble tonight, and I figure we could have some question and answers, I'm hoping. And I do have an actual topic, which I'll get to eventually. But I'm sitting there in the Senate, and one of the state senators was waxing poetic about the days of 90% tax rates. And I'm like, I don't know, that's the kind of thinking, and nobody even seemed to, everyone's just kind of nodding along. I was in the assembly, and one assemblyman, it was on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and there's a lot to honor there, but he was talking about how it's not, I don't have the exact quote, but it's not enough to be free to live in any neighborhood that you want if you can't afford to live in any neighborhood you want. I'm like, well, I can't afford to live in Bel Air or East Sacramento, but I still like to think that, the ability to afford something, we're not quite a socialist republic yet, so I don't know, I guess you can't be a socialist republic, but you know what I mean. I'm used to asinine bills being introduced. I've seen it for years, but things have really changed in the last few years. Now they actually pass, and some of them actually get into law, and a lot of them get into law. I mean, it used to be the real liberal caucus would introduce stuff just because they could, and it would die a slow death in the committee. And now the stuff, anything that gets introduced anymore, I'm like, this could pass, anything could pass. All bets are off. So maybe we can discuss later. I'm going to focus more on some government spending issues and pension issues, but maybe we can discuss what some of the solutions are. Because I know Tim Draper, who had the 6 Californias proposal, and the talk about Jefferson, but realistically, there's not a lot of chance that those things are going to happen. And we're outvoted. I mean, people who want to keep taxes low, regulations low, keep the government out of our lives. But I often talk to conservatives that government is the problem. I mean, it used to not be controversial to say that among conservatives, but I increasingly find conservatives who they believe in limited government, but they're okay with the NSA spying on us, and they're not that worried when police abuse their authority. And I've covered a lot of police abuse things that are very troubling. And it's just government, all government, that's my view, is all government is a problem. All government is about force, and it's about forcing us to do what's decided in the political arena. And to be free means, being free to live the lives that we choose, as long as we don't harm somebody else. And it also means allowing other people to be free to live in ways that we don't approve of, as long as they don't harm anyone else or force people to do whatever they want. So, it's just kind of, I spent many years at Freedom Communications, the Orange County Register, and I've watched local governments, and I worked in Orange County, which is still, oddly enough, mostly Republican, and I've covered corruption and everything from Republicans, and the Democratic ideology is largely insane, but power is still a corrupting influence no matter who wields it. And one of the things I liked about the Tea Party was it came to defy either party and to stand for a set of principles and not just a party. So anyway, the legislature's crazy, and everyone ought to pay more attention to it. And the main goal is social engineering. I have a piece for tomorrow about the transportation bill. It's not about transportation engineering, it's about social engineering. Most of the legislators and the governor want us to get out of our cars and get on the light rail line, or maybe we could wait for the bullet train to get completed. So next time I want to go from Merced to wherever the heck it's Coalinga or wherever it's going to go. And they want to change our behavior, and that's what so much of what's happening there. They don't want to leave us alone. They don't want to build roads. They want to build projects that change our behavior. I remember when San Jose actually closed a freeway lane after they opened their light rail line. Not enough people were taking the light rail, so they wanted to create congestion and force people onto the light rail line. That's a true story. I call it the congestion lobby. Okay. They have an endless number of social programs that they want to fund. The bureaucracy is to expand. I mean, the budget of the last 5 years has gone up $36 billion, and yet there's no money to spend on transportation unless we all agree, well, we didn't agree, to raise our gas taxes by 19 cents a gallon, right? We already have the highest gas prices in the nation because of the special formulation that can only be produced in California. They think government is always the solution, and I've learned from my years of reporting that government's always the problem. It really is. There's some things that government has to do, I agree, but I've never seen it done well. There's nothing I've seen, I can't think of a single thing that the government's done that I think is done well. And conservatives used to know that as a fact. I mean, and I always say, I'd rather just take my money. I just sent a check for $4,500 to the IRS. It'll be more productively used if I put it through a paper shredder. But they have the guns. I have guns too, but They're locked up in the closet, so they can force me to do what they want, what they need, so I send them the money. So I remember when Richard Alarcon, he was a senator, and I believe he was Senate Majority Leader, he once said something to the effect that Republicans were complaining that a lot of businesses are fleeing the state, and he said something to the effect if they don't like it here, they can go rip off another state. And I think that's kind of ought to be the motto of the legislature, right? They have no concept of what it takes to run a business, what's involved. I mean, I'm a journalist, I work for a think tank, so I get a paycheck, but I do have a little property business on the side. I have some investment properties, including one in Marysville, a couple in Oroville. Boy, it's something when you actually have to make ends meet, and when you have to deal with government agencies, and they never seem to be your friend. They're not there to help. They really aren't. And I think that the more that we remind ourselves of that, and remind ourselves, free markets actually work. They work better than regulation. I was just in Honolulu speaking about their pension debt. So everyone assumes it's a junket if you go to Hawaii, but real people live in Hawaii, and they have a massive pension problem. That's one of the lowest paid populaces in the country in Hawaii, and yet the government employees are among some of the highest, and they have a massive pension debt, and the system's only like 54% funded. But while I was there, I just took Uber, and it's great, right? I mean, it solves all the regulation problems that taxi regulation has never solved. And I remember I had, when I was writing an article that was very favorable towards that whole that's a great free market end run around a highly regulated system. And I remember one of the taxi groups, I was down in San Diego, they pointed to a tragic accident, an Uber driver, and of course if people drive vehicles, there are going to be tragic accidents, it's sad, but it's the state of affairs, and they were making the argument that Uber's not safe because of one accident in San Francisco. So I went and did some research on taxi accidents, I Googled taxi accidents, I got about 1,000 of them, and wrote a column arguing that we ought to make taxis illegal because of it. But the free market, that's a great example of how the free market works. It solves all the problems through competition, through people trying to serve customers. Regulation should be, there should just be some general, easily understood rules, and then the market should be free to do what they want and to innovate, and that's what markets are all about. So I always go back to Mencken, H.L. Mencken, great Baltimore journalist, says the whole aim of practical politics is to keep the populace alarmed and hence clamorous to be led to safety by an endless series of hobgoblins, most of them imaginary. And that's really what government's about. And California government, they're masters of that. And of course, keep that in mind as Governor Brown warns about the existential threat of global warming. I mean, we're all going to burn up in a fireball unless you pay more in taxes and give the state regulators unlimited authority to protect you. This is something I wrote last week. There are some trailer bills, and trailer bills they're technical budget bills. So the budget's passed, and then you pass some trailer bills that don't have all the hearings. They're just rushed through, and there's not a lot of examination of them. And they're just supposed to be technical cleanup language to implement the budget bill. So they pass the general budget bill, and then they need technical language to implement some of the elements of it. But what they do is they sneak in substantive measures in those trailer bills, and then this way you don't have to have a full set of hearings and vetting and public discourse and us evil people in the media writing stories that you don't like. Well, anyway, all these, Rahm Emanuel, the former Obama chief of staff and illustrious mayor of Chicago, who said, don't let a crisis go to waste, never let a crisis go to waste. Well, Governor Brown's not letting the drought crisis go to waste. He's making these drought provisions permanent, and that's what's in the trailer bills. They're giving state water officials the power to restrict us from washing our cars and watering our lawns, and they're making it permanent. And I haven't seen any news stories other than mine about it. And it's just not widely discussed, and yet it's a massive grab of authority. And if you need water, some sort of conservation measures, whatever, but he's giving a carte blanche to the water agencies. And I've never seen in my life regulators able to do anything without coercion and abuse. So that's just something to look out for. Meanwhile, we're squandering, we don't have any money for roads and bridges and freeways, and the new tax increase has $750 million for transit. It's supposed to go to roads. Well, there's transit money, and there's park money, and there's bike trail money, and there's walking path. I mean, bike trails are fine. I mean, I'm not going to get on a bike, but whatever, some people do. It's fine, but that's not what it was supposed to be about. But meanwhile, he's squandering $68 billion on a high-speed rail line that isn't even going to be a high-speed rail line, because they have something called the blended route, so it's going to share tracks with Caltrain, which means it can't go particularly fast. Now, California already has a bullet train. It's called Southwest Airlines. I can get to Los Angeles in an hour and 10 minutes for about half the promised cost of the train ticket. That's all. Yes, sir.
Well, the crux of the whole thing is it goes to Baker Street.
Hey, Tom,
Yeah.
Let's hold the questions till the end.
We'll discuss it later, but I'll get to that. Yeah.
Just so everybody knows, you're gonna have a mic to ask a question.
And how long should I ramble? What are you thinking? I don't. Half hour?
Sure, another half hour.
Half hour, all right? Or if I see people falling asleep, I'll just shut up. So. Anyway, you see, I'm easily, that's why we can't have questions in the middle of it, because I'm easily diverted. Anyway, we're seeing the squandering of dollars. I've got a piece tomorrow about all these local transportation projects that are being built to serve a high-speed rail train. That's never going to happen. So in Orange County, they built a monumental structure that's running a huge deficit. And only serves a portion of the people that were promised. So basically, anything government promises, it's not going to come true, except for spending, because then it's going to go way above that, right? So I was looking at a report of major infrastructure projects across the world, and they always end up being at least triple what the promised costs were. So that $68 billion, we can, I'm a journalist, so my math isn't that great, but we could figure what that's going to cost. Anyway, that's the kind of thing. We've got a state government that has caused an enormous pension crisis, which I'm going to talk about mostly today. But they've also created a new mini Social Security program to deal with the private sector. So they've done such a good job in the public sector that they're going to deal with the private sector. So the people who created $1 trillion in debt, and that's according to the California Policy Center. It all depends on some of the variables that you use. In the public employee system, they're going to help private sector workers boost the retirement. And that does get to the topic tonight, pensions and public employees. My book in 2009 was subtly titled book called Plunder. And remember when the editor was like in the first chapter and called my book publisher complaining that something was offensive in it. And then he called me and I said, look, if you're not offended by the title, and if it takes you halfway into the first chapter to be offended, then I don't think there's anything to worry about, do you? So we just kind of left it. But Bill Locke, your former treasurer, and he's a real advocate for the public sector. That's probably the most Christian way of putting it. And he years ago gave a talk. He was upset about pension envy. Now, pension envy, that's what the public sector calls those of us in the private sector who have to work harder and harder to pay for some of these pension spiking deals. We've got pension envy here. No, we're concerned about the amount of money, and yeah, the system's unfair. But anyway, he came up with this mini Social Security system idea as a way to throw a few crumbs at private workers to fix the problem of the lack of political sustainability of the pensions. He and his union allies had so successfully plundered the system, that's the name of a book, that they were worried that us peons were going to cause trouble for them. And we were. In 2012, there was a pension reform movement brewing. There were some initiatives that were proposed. Kamala Harris, the former state attorney general, now U.S. Senator, wrote these outrageously biased titles and summaries for the initiatives, which killed the initiatives in the cradle. And of course, most voters don't read all the verbiage of the initiatives. They read the title and the summary, and the title, you know, the throw the mama from the train initiative isn't going to get a whole lot of support. So anyway, but our pension systems are a really big problem. I mean, we have Californians in Marysville and Yuba City and everywhere, especially in inland California, are earning $40,000, $50,000 a year. And they have to work longer and harder to pay for millionaires' pensions for a lot of average public employees. And they are millionaires' pensions. If you have a $150,000 a year pension guaranteed for your life and the life of your spouse, how many millions of dollars would you need to have in the bank as an equivalent? In some of these cases that I've looked at, they're $8 to $10 million. I mean, that's unbelievable. And, you know, I'm not saying that, you know, we should shut down their pensions entirely, but it's just really unfair. So the big problem, and it gets back to the Capitol, is public employee unions control it. I mean, they absolutely own the place. They walk around like they own the place, which is true because they do own the place. So it took how many years after that horrible child molestation case at a public school at LA Unified School District? It took several years to pass a bill that was meant simply to deal with you know, teachers who were committing outrageous acts, right? Because the California Teachers Association has so much power. The prison guards have so much power. And so think about any state issue, and that was really the focus of my book. If you look at any state issue, you know, poor performing schools. My dad was a public school teacher. He was a liberal Democrat, but he refused to join the union because he knew what unions did to you know, the school with the rubber rooms. You know, if a teacher is found to be not unfit for the classroom, which is hard enough, but if you find a teacher unfit for the classroom, you can't fire them, so they sit in what are called rubber rooms, earning their full pay and collecting their full accruals of benefits while their case gets adjudicated, which could take years. I was on a John Stossel show, and he had the same thing in New York. He was using a New York school district example, so he had a sheet of paper in small print with all these little charts of what it takes to fire a New York City school teacher, and by the time he got to the end of the page with all the little arrows and boxes and administrative proceedings and appeals, everyone's laughing in the audience, and then he let loose. It was 4 more pages after that. So you can't fire teachers. They have something called the Dance of the Lemons, where when you have a bad teacher, you foist them on another district and you move them around. And of course, we have the seniority issues. So the first in, what is it, last in, first out. So we just had some layoffs in Southern California, so that they first get rid of a lot of the best teachers, the youngest teachers, and that's because of the unions. The unions make it impossible to have the kind of reforms that are needed to create a more free market oriented, a better performing school system. If any of us ran our businesses that way, they would be, you know, like the Monty Python and X-Parrot, they would be X-businesses. So poor performing schools. I've covered, I used to be a super pro-police guy, and then I did a lot of reporting on police corruption issues, and that changed me. And you know, all power corrupts. You know, all power is corrupting. Even agencies that you need, like police, you still have corruption. But what I found is that in my reporting, that a small number of officers cause a whole lot of problems, and you can't get rid of them. And there was a case just in Santa Ana that I wrote about, where they caught some officers on a hidden video doing some really terrible things at a medical marijuana dispensary, and they still can't fire them. In fact, the administrative hearing reinstated the officers. So the result is, if you can't get rid of the bad apples, they infect the whole department and they continue to cause problems. And so it's another union problem. I do think that we could have a lot more common ground and solve some of these, you know, policing issues. if it wasn't for the Peace Officers' Bill of Rights and the union protections and the code of silence, and these are all union created problems that we can't get around. And that's a problem. Crime rates, we can't try new policing strategies because of union work protections. There's not enough money for roads, right? Well, the Legislative Analyst's Office, they did an audit 2 or 3 years ago and found that there are 3,500 Caltrans employees with essentially nothing to do and sitting there with their feet on the table. In fact, it was a pretty interesting audit. They had someone go through Caltrans and find all these people with nothing to do. They're collecting large, mostly above $100,000 a year salaries, plus full benefits, and they have nothing to do. Now, in a sane world, you would get rid of people who aren't necessary so that you have more money to spend on roads, right? But because of the union work rules, we also have one of the lowest percentages of contracting out. And it's only like 10% in California because of all the union rules that restrict contracting out. So here's, again, another case of a major problem in the state that's caused by union I'm not saying you don't have unions, but they have too much power in the capital. Too high taxes, well, you can figure that out. Huge liabilities and debts. Hundreds of billions of dollars in debts. That's money that our kids and our grandkids are going to have to pay to fulfill the promises that are made now. In 1999, there was a bill called SB 400, Senate Bill 400, which promised the CalPERS and the state legislature and Governor Gray Davis promised that it wouldn't cost taxpayers a dime to get this retroactively, going back to when they started, give a 50% pension increase to public employees across the state. So when you go from 2% to 3%, that's just a 1% increase. No, it's a 50% increase. And if I'm about to retire tomorrow, I get the increase going back to the day I started 30 years ago. But state legislators promised that it wouldn't cost us a dime. They also assumed that the Dow Jones would hit 28 million. I kid you not. So anyway, they promised that, and now we see it's cost billions of dollars, and it's crushing cities. City of Stockton's bankruptcy, Vallejo, San Bernardino. It's not entirely caused by pensions. It's caused by a lot of other government programs and reckless spending, but it's a lot of that is caused by pensions. And even cities that are healthy, like San Jose, has had a 350% increase in their pension costs over 10 years. So cities are cutting back services because of the massive costs. So anyway. Okay, pension debts, I mentioned, could be, depending on what number you figure. I mean, pension debts are calculated by guessing a return on investment. CalPERS guesses 7.5% rate of return forever and ever. Last year I got 0.61% rate of return. So that's a compound math problem. Yeah, it's a big problem. And so they're going to lower by 2020 the rate of return to 7%. But the funny thing is, if you're a city and you want to get out of the CalPERS system, they'll only pay you 3.8%. So I'd love to know where I could just get a 7.5% guaranteed rate of return for the next 30 years. That's where I would just take my money, I'd put it in there, and I'd sit there and go fishing on Oroville Lake. I think you can still go fishing there if the dam doesn't collapse. So anyway, this is what's happening, and a lot of these issues on pensions and unfunded liabilities, retiree medical care. It's kind of hard to understand, right? I mean, it's not something that's that interesting to think about. So most people kind of gloss over it, and understandably so. But it's causing a massive problem, and it's driven by union control. So I wrote Plunder in 2009. I saw massive wealth transfer from the private sector to the public sector. That's what it's all about, taking private sector money and giving it to the public sector. Public servants now are our masters. That was my preferred subtitle, but anyone who publishes a book has to deal with publishers. So, but it's not just the dollars. it's less, we get less private initiative, right? The more the government does, it crowds out the private sector. So we get less private initiative, we get more bureaucracy, we get less choice and less accountability. I mean, I don't believe that the Soviet Union was known for its excellent public services. I mean, there's no government, the bigger government gets, the more bureaucratic everything gets. Do we really want more of the world to resemble, your trip to the Department of Motor Vehicles? I mean, we could put up with it the once a year I've got to go over there. But is that really? I mean, think about our health care. Don't get me started on a separate topic, but we all know what it's like fighting with insurance companies and government bureaucracies and Medicare. It's a nightmare, and our lives are at stake in many cases. So when I wrote the book, it was '09. People hadn't really paid a lot of attention to the issue, so it was kind of a Jeremiah. But things have gotten worse since then, and I look at things like the Oroville Dam problem, right? So I have a couple properties in Oroville that told my wife, kiss our retirement goodbye if that spillway fails. But the fact is that's in a way is a pension problem, because if the state, it's also a priority problem, but if the state is spending all its money on pensions and unnecessary programs, it's not spending money doing the things it's supposed to do, like maintaining its infrastructure. I live on 6 acres near the Cosumnes River, and those levees, I mean, weren't they built in the 1800s, right? It's unbelievable, and they're just earthen levees. And I was watching, my house is sitting there I'm only a half mile from the last undammed river in California. I guess that was a really smart purchase, but we were fine. But I'm sitting there watching them patch the dam, and it was like, oh my God! You like to think that there's some engineering going on. No, they're just dropping big pieces of rock and dirt on it. So anyway, but I heard the legislators say that the Oroville Dam is a global warming problem. That's what Governor Brown said. Anyway, any new tax is now actually a pension tax because money is fungible. So one city manager said that in California, cities are becoming pension providers that provide public services on the side. There's something called service insolvency, and that's when cities can pay the bills, but they can't provide an adequate level of service. Now, we foolish people that we are, we think that we pay our taxes so that the cities and the state and the feds can provide a certain number of services to help us and protect us. They don't do that. They squander the money in all sorts of ridiculous ways, mostly on the people who work for the government. And then when they run out, they say, oh, I'm sorry, you greedy people better pay us more in taxes, or else we're not going to be able to provide all these services that, by the way, we're not providing anyway. So I mentioned SB 400, but now it's led to a whole lot of outrageous abuses, and it's not just anecdotal. The LA Times just had a piece recently about a police officer who has 2 pensions, and he's my age, and he's receiving $498,000 a year. Now, I'm sorry. We all respect what a lot of folks do for a living, but that's not a $500,000 a year job guaranteed for life, right? I mean, that's ridiculous. That you didn't sign up to be a multimillionaire to do a job like that. Here we've got a lieutenant who got his law degree while working as a police officer. Shy of his 38th birthday, he retired, got $110,000 pension guaranteed for life. And anyway, plus he's drawing now a very large salary, and it's a $13.2 million pension if he lives a normal lifespan. So, just on and on. The average median firefighter salary in California is salary and benefits, and that's not counting the unfunded portion, is $184,000 a year. I mean, that's good work if you can get it. In fact, you can't get it. When there were 5 firefighter openings in San Diego, they opened Qualcomm Stadium because there were so many applicants. I wonder what? If I was hiring a new associate at work and I had 22,000 people lining up at my door to apply, it might suggest to me that either the whole economy's collapsed or maybe I'm offering too generous of a pay and benefit package, right? the University of California, now my daughter's an ag student at Davis, and so I keep her out of the liberal arts. She lives at the Cal Barnes, but it's still a good school for sciences. But they have a department that deals with inequality. Anyway, if you work for that department that deals with inequality, you get a salary and benefit package of $375,000 to $525,000 a year in compensation. Wow, that really pays to deal with inequality at UC. And did you see the state audit on the UC system? That was just, I read that thing, 168 pages. I mean, usually the auditor is very calm. I mean, you read the audits and it's like, come on, speak your mind. They very carefully say, well, this could be done better, or it appears as if. No, they slammed the UC office of the president. Big surprise, Janet Napolitano was recruited to be the head of this, right? And what is she good at?
Communism.
Well, she's good at building bureaucracies. And the audit, although UC denies it, the audit says that they had a hidden fund of reserves. And then the funniest thing of the audit was their defense from Napolitano's office, because she said, oh no, we need these reserves to fight sexual harassment. And then our money isn't misspent. And then she talked about the these are very important programs. The first one she pointed to was $25.2 million over 3 years for the Undocumented Students Initiative. And then there's the Global Food Initiative. I mean, what the heck is the UC Office of the President spending money on that sort of stuff? So anyway, on these pensions, taxpayers are on the hook for them all. And California public workers receive twice what average private sector workers receive when you figure in the pay and benefits. And so this is just a huge problem. I don't know what we do about it. Well, it would be a nice start. So anyway, there are all sorts of, I was going to point out, there are all sorts of solutions. People always say to me when I give talks, how come you don't offer solutions? Okay, well, solutions are easy. Like you said, fire people. We could all sit around afterwards over a few beers and come up with some solutions. We can shift to 401k, right? We could turn disability into an insurance matter, like in the private sector. In the public sector, there's something called chief's disease. I have yet to meet a police chief who is not retired on a disability. I remember the guy who dropped his briefcase on his toe, irritable bowel syndrome. They view it as an entitlement. And that's because other public employees are making that decision. So we can turn it into an insurance issue. Like if I claim I'm disabled and after my boss stops laughing an hour from now, I have to go through a meat grinder called an insurance company, and good luck with that. We can end these myriad pension spiking gimmicks. You get state gardeners get special pension benefits for working on sprinklers. And managers get special management pay. I mean, there's an official list of 99 pension spiking gimmicks that are really rather humorous if it wasn't, my blood pressure goes up, but it is funny in a way. We could cap pensions. We could remove taxpayer backing. My union friends say these systems should be self-sustaining. I'm like, great, then you don't need us. Here, do it, do it. But we can make them self-sustaining. We could privatize services. Sandy Springs, Georgia has one of the most effective city governments in the nation. It doesn't have a city government. They outsourced it. I worked for a military base years ago that was actually run by 3 private contractors. And sure, it was still filled with waste and abuse and stupidity. But at least they had to compete with each other every 5 years, and it provided some pressure to keep the cost down and to keep the customer happy. You see, in government, there are no customers. We're just subjects, and that's the main point to understand. But it's a political problem. So we could come up with all sorts. I've heard all sorts of things that would work great. I just had someone bring an idea to me the other day. Great idea. It just isn't going to work because of the political problem. How do you get around the politics? So you go to the initiative process, and that system is totally rigged. I mentioned Kamala Harris. How do you get past an attorney general who writes grossly biased titles and summaries, and she's not the first one to do it. Designed, I mean, the Sacramento Bee, which is not a bastion of right-wing thinking, accused Harris of taking it out of a union playbook. So anyway, because it appears that she did. I mean, there was some surveying done by a union group, and that wording, to identify the wording that would scare people away from the initiative, and that wording seemed to make its way in the title and summary. I don't know. So there's something called the California rule, which is a big problem. What needs to happen on pensions, like I had a pension from Freedom Communications. It's a big one. I get $305 a year for me and my wife until we go to that great newspaper in the sky. But what happened was, up until at one point while I was working there, we were told that they could no longer afford the same level of pension benefits. I'd be made whole through the end of today. Starting tomorrow, you will start receiving a lower benefit, namely zero. I said, okay, whatever. I don't feel like getting a new job, so that's that. You can't do that in the public sector. There's something called the California rule, which isn't even a rule, it's just some legal precedents going back to the 50s. Once a legislative body, a city council or the legislature grants a pension increase, that's good until you die. I mean, you cannot trim it back, even starting tomorrow. So when Governor Brown and the legislature said, we fixed the problem by passing this law in 2013, they call PEPRA, whatever. That's for new hires. They start retiring in 25 to 30 years. The problem is now. So that's the big problem that we have, and that has to, this California Supreme Court is going to be addressing that next year, and if we can get some changes in a legal decision, we can maybe rein in some of those costs. So anyway, bankruptcy, the federal bankruptcy judge in the Stockton case said that yes, you can abrogate pensions in bankruptcy, but the city chose not to, and instead decided to raise taxes on the public, and so we haven't gotten to see how that would go. There was this one law firm that represented unions across the state, and they were so proud of what they called their playbook that they published it on their website. It's now down after the reporting, and I think the law firm was shut down, but it basically about how police can intimidate people, scare people into voting for higher taxes for police services. And that's the sort of thing that local city officials have to deal with. Those are powerful forces, the local firefighters. I mean, I've spoken at groups where the union people stand at the back with their union logos with their arms crossed, which just makes me pick on their pension programs even more. But imagine if you're a city council, I don't worry about getting elected to anything, but imagine if you're a city council member. So we need to fix the political problem. So, and I'll just go through a couple things and then we'll get to questions, but I know this is going to shock all of you, but the union people tell all sorts of tall tales. And I know, it's just shocking. So you've got to watch out for some of these things, because this is what they come back at. Well, the average pension is only 35 or 37 or whatever it is a year for public employees. Well, yeah, that's still 4 times what the average, if you're going to do the average for the private sector, but we'll forget that for a minute. But that includes people who, started working in the Pleistocene era. I mean, it's all the big pension increases happened since the late 1990s, since 99. And averages, of course, you have the guy who works 6 years up in Siskiyou County gets thrown in there with, so the averages are just averages, but the formulas are the formulas. If you got 3% at 50, that's what you get. 3% times the number of years worked, that's 90% of your final year's pay, plus pension spiking gimmicks, and you don't have to pay into PERS anymore, so you'll retire with 125% of your final year's pay. The average California Highway Patrol officer after 20 years retires with $98,000 a year, and his spouse gets that money too. And they have something now, this is a real term, it's called an actuarial term called the Viagra effect. A lot of these people with the lush pensions are marrying very young second wives, and then we're on the hook to pay until they head to the great fire station in the sky. The other thing you hear, and I was on the Stossel show and some union official brought this up, and I had done the research. I got all my numbers from CalPERS, which is awful as CalPERS is. They have really great numbers. They have to know. He said, the reason public safety officials get these lush pensions is they die 3 to 5 years after they retire. Well, actually, they're the longest living category of any public employee. They live to be in their mid-80s. So anyway, there are all sorts of things. The disabilities, they say, well, people are disabled so much and our professions are so dangerous. Look at all the disabilities. Well, that's because the disability system is abusive. That allows pretty much anyone, every police chief that I know of in the state, even if you have irritable bowel syndrome, I mean, a lot of things that people get. I'm 56, I'm sorry, but backs ache, right? And a lot of folks here are older than me. Things start to ache after a while. We wear out. And if you're a firefighter, you're 117 years old, and you get a certain type of cancer, it's presumed to be caused by your job. I mean, we're getting into the silly season here. So anyway, these are things to watch out for when they use those sorts of excuses for why the system is the way it is. But the system's the way it is because the unions have political power in the Capitol, and there's no appetite to take them on directly. And that's just all there is to it. And the system's really rigged when we want to take initiative approach. And a lot of these decisions are made at the local level, and at the local level, unions have an inordinate amount of power. I mean, I remember the symbolic thing was after a negotiation in Orange County, which was this massive giveaway to public employees who saw the union member and the personnel director who was representing the city sitting in a very public restaurant in downtown Santa Ana, splitting a bottle of champagne. I mean, they're negotiating with themselves, right? I mean, she got the benefit too. I mean, all the CalPERS employees who said that SB 400 wouldn't cost us a dime, they got the benefit. The officials who supposedly negotiate, they're elected by the unions. So where do the taxpayers come in? And I got to say, I mean, I love the Tea Party and taxed enough already, but at the one time I've been yelled at a speech was at a Tea Party group because one of the folks was taxed enough already, but he was getting a big pension from Sacramento. So anyway, and so my point there is I don't begrudge them their pension; they earned it, but the fact is, it's tough, right? Because the government is so insidious, and many of us, have been working many people have been working for the government. So anyway, there's no easy fix, and that's what I'm hoping maybe we can discuss. So what the heck do we do? I wish I knew. I wish I had some answers. But there have been two issues I've watched in my many years covering these things. There have only been 2 times I remember a victory of any substance. One was the elimination of redevelopment agencies. That was a great victory. I never thought they would go away. Those are those Soviet-style planning agencies that reside in your little local hometown where they obliterate property rights and abuse eminent domain and give massive corporate subsidies to big box stores. And I had written about it. My first book was about it, and it was hopeless. It was totally hopeless. There's no way. Well, anyway, Jerry Brown, long story short, or short story long, Jerry Brown eliminates redevelopment agencies. Now, he didn't do it for the right reason. We know that, but I don't care. If your political enemy's going to do what you want them to do, even for the wrong reason, just take it. And I think what happened was a lot of the people who were opposed to the abuses from the redevelopment agencies had set the groundwork. And had made the case, and I know one assembly member who was against redevelopment had met with Governor Brown and made the case, and then the timing was right. There was a budget shortfall. Redevelopment consumed 12% of the state's budget, and boom, they were gone. Same thing with civil asset forfeiture. It's one thing to take money from cars and homes and money from drug dealers or alleged drug dealers, but they're taking it from average people without due process, right? The Fourth Amendment means something to me. So I get a conviction first, but it didn't seem like that would ever get by the police lobby. But it did just last year, and a major reform to that. And I think it was because people just kept stirring the pot, stirring the pot. So that's the only closest thing to optimism I can ever offer is just keep stirring the pot. Maybe the time will be right. Probably not for the right reason. We're not going to convert everybody to our political beliefs. I'm a libertarian, so we can't even convert ourselves, right? we all have 15 different views. So you just keep stirring the pot. So I'll just end with Mencken again. The most dangerous man to any government is the man who is able to think things out without regard to the prevailing superstitions and taboos. Almost inevitably, he comes to the conclusion that the government he lives under is dishonest, insane, and intolerable. So anyway, thanks, and I'll take any questions you want. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yeah, you were talking about the bullet train. For decades, people in San Joaquin Valley have been screaming for a rail line over the Grapevine. Now you have the privilege of going, stopping in Bakersfield, then you get to take a bus for 2.5 hours into LA. Then you pick up a train and go down to San Diego. So I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, well, the bullet train, they can't figure out how to get over the Tehachapi Mountains, and once they figure that out, then they have to get over the San Gabriel Mountains. And you know, I don't know if that, I really don't think it's ever going to happen, especially with the Republicans in Congress. But sure enough, the governor's going to spend the $9.95 billion that voters in their wisdom approved in 2008.
Don't you think that the whole system will self-implode eventually?
No, this is what I'm afraid of is the slow destruction of things. Like, and when people, I used to think that, and a lot of people have said, you know, it's like Greece, it'll become, but then I think of this one example, Detroit. So Detroit, if you go to Detroit, people haven't, the city is a non-functioning city, right? I mean, they have corpses piled up in morgues. In Detroit, they have something called, they don't have urban sprawl, they have rural sprawl, because they knock down buildings. You could farm within sight of downtown. You probably need a pretty good armory if you're gonna do so, and some good fencing. But the fact is, the city is the Wild West. Aside, they have a couple areas that have come back. You know, there's this talk of this downtown Detroit revival. Yeah, sure, 5 square blocks are pretty nice. Again, you might want to get a concealed carry permit. But the city is an absolute collapsing, and you can't get change. I mean, the only change they've been able to put a receiver in charge of it. So I think people, it's the old frog boiling thing. People just slowly get used to things, and it becomes very hard to change, and people vote with their feet. So that's, I think, what's happening in California a lot, is we have so many people leaving for other states that it just becomes hard. I remember I was amazed when a Democratic president won. I think Obama won California with 2 million votes. I mean, Hillary Clinton won with 4 million votes. I mean, not, you know, that's the marker for everything, but the fact is our voters keep leaving. And I don't know. So I don't think it's going to get so bad that everyone's going to wake up and it's yeah. There's a lot of wealth to squander before we get to that point, I guess would be my
Question over here.
Yes, how much of the money that is taken out of the gas tax fund is being used to fund the high-speed rail? Is it being used to backfill pensions?
No, well, there's $750 million is going to transit projects. Now, I don't know that that's going to high-speed rail directly. But yeah, $750 million a year goes to, according to the Republican Senate analysis, is going to various transit projects, and I haven't looked closely. My point on the pensions, that money isn't going to go to the pensions, but my point was that, for instance, the state by 2019 is going to be putting in $11 billion a year just in direct costs to fund the pensions. And had it cleaned up that mess, that amount is double, right, the $5.2 billion a year that the new gas tax is going to provide. So if you money's fungible, so if you're able to clean up one mess, then you don't need to hit taxpayers up for another. That's my point. But the money, no, the gas tax money is not going to be used to pensions. But my argument is all taxes now are pension taxes because we won't fix this hole, and we've got to come up with money to fill that hole. And you know, and so the bottom line is if you don't fix big fiscal problems, you got to find money somewhere else to do the things you're supposed to do, and that usually means in California hitting up taxpayers for more. Now that Democrats have a supermajority, that tax route's going to be taken a lot. Anyone else?
Do you think there's any possible route to take back California from the liberals? Because looking at California, it kind of sets the rest of the country on pace, and that's why there's such a battle to keep it away from us. Because if we took over California, and right now, like President Trump, that's why California's the resistance, is because we're still fighting. Really, it's kind of like anti-American down in Southern California. But do you think with the new president, or there's any possible path to taking back the government of California?
No. I think we're so, the imbalance, the voting imbalance. Now, on some things, that's where we got to. I started out talking a little bit about the Six Californias idea and all. I mean, consider this, Pete Peterson, he was the Republican Secretary of State candidate. He was actually would have made a good Secretary of State, a moderate Republican from Los Angeles, actually understood the office and all. Anyway, he did really well as Republicans in that last election cycle, the previous election cycle, and he still lost. And he basically did great everywhere. But Los Angeles County, consider LA County has 10 million people. And it would be the 9th largest state on its own population-wise, and it's 70-75% Democratic. And Alameda County, which isn't that big, but it votes like 84% Democratic. So I mean, I'd love to meet the 60% who vote for Republicans in Alameda County. So those two counties, he just lost those two counties, and the volume of votes is so severe. It's like a tsunami. I've watched a lot of elections where you're looking at the election results in the state, and you're like, wow, the Republicans are doing pretty good. Well, they're winning, they're winning a lot of places. They're holding their own in some others, and then boom, the tidal wave comes in from LA County voters, right? And what's so funny, I did a piece a couple weeks ago for American Spectator. The Democrats aren't happy enough. Right, there's one Republican supervisor in Los Angeles County, which is silly, having 5 supervisors for 10 million people. But they've got their eyes on that. They want to get rid of the Republican supervisor by gerrymandering the districts, and and they're targeting targeting Orange County, which is 5 Republicans, and San Diego, which is 4 Republicans, and Fresno. So they're coming after the few remaining places where Republicans have any say at all.
I just like to know, is there anyone that holds them accountable? Does our federal government hold Brown accountable? He's breaking laws against our Constitution, against everything we stand for as Americans, and yet we can't do anything about it. We can't fire him. We, the people of this country, are the ones that own this country. Why are we listening to people that are ruining it, dragging it down? There's got to be consequences held somewhere.
What are you going to do?
Can somebody get these people out?
Well, you'd have to think that there would be a much larger problem if the feds came in and removed elected officials. I mean, that would be a tyrannical act.
They're doing tyranny against the public right now. What's the difference?
I know it's just you can't beat tyranny with tyranny, and I don't know. I don't know what you do. We're supposed to be a self-governing people, and if we reach a point where a lot of the founders address the issue, you reach the point where you get outnumbered, or people don't seem to believe much in liberty and limited government, and you just kind of stuck with the consequences. I think it's more of an and then what good would it do, right? I mean, what we need to do is educate people and hope that we can change the paradigm. But you can't expect the feds, and the federal government is just as evil as our state government. It's just, all government is bad, and all of it is tyrannical, and everything government does is awful. And I personally, I think the Trump administration is good. They're going to abuse government in a totally different way than the Obama administration abused government, but they're going to abuse government, and we already see signs of it. And I'm not saying it isn't better than the hideous alternative, but don't expect anybody, I mean, don't expect that if we elect Republicans. I've spent my career reporting on Republicans who abuse government. And the problem is government. The problem isn't putting the right people in charge. The problem is limiting government so that it can't do any harm. The government should be the ideal, and what the founders believed in is the government does all these checks and balances. Part of it is the feds and the state are designed to keep each branch from exerting too much power. That's why we have, we have the judicial, the executive, and the congressional.
And none of it's working. You still got these people making laws for us to follow that are unconstitutional. They're breaking the laws of our Constitution that we live on by God. Everything's under God.
Well, and we have to, you have to fight the way we fight. You fight in the courts when there's some grievous.
Yeah, is that telling me that you're telling me that all these government corrupt people are above God and we have no recourse to them? We have to just bend over and let the government do it?
No, you just have to.
Then tell us how to stand up. Tell us how to do this.
It's a complicated process. I mean, we can't just expect the federal government, which is just as unaccountable.
Would it help if everybody stood in legislation every day? Give us something. Somebody in government's got to give us something.
What do you do? What do you do if we're in a democratic government that we are here and we're outnumbered? What do you do? What do you do when you're outnumbered?
I can't believe that the government has control over the people of this country. Why can't the people just finally say enough is enough? Let's stop paying taxes for one day. What do you think that would do to all these people?
And a lot of good people in jail. That's what it would do.
That's my point. They're putting good people in jail, and the crooks are telling them to put them in jail. That's not right.
I know. Yes.
Couple of questions. If California became a sanctuary state, what would that mean for the people of California? And then secondly, I'm a great admirer and fan of William Jasper, who is the senior editor of the New American Magazine, and the John Birch Society is doing something against the evil in this country. So number one, what happens, do you think we're going to become a sanctuary state? And number two, do you know William Jasper?
No, I've known about the John Birch Society, but I don't read their materials. I don't know. There were some issues with them that I found interesting.
But they've done a lot of good so far as the bills that
they got into a little bit of conspiratorial stuff, which always troubled me, so I always ignored them. But
what about the sanctuary state?
I'm sure we're going to end up being a sanctuary state, and I don't think it'll change much of anything. Do you? I mean, it's nothing's really. A lot of it's very symbolic. But what is it? SB 54 probably will become law, I would imagine. I have a daughter who lives in San Francisco. It's it's a sanctuary city. A lot of the different localities are passing things, sanctuary state bills, resolutions. There's a lot of variety of what it does. But yeah, essentially it ties the hands of law enforcement to remove people who are here illegally. I think that's going to happen, and we'll just have to see what the results are.
I hope that Trump cuts the funding to the state.
Well, he's already backed away from that, but he might, right?
Money for the spillway.
Yeah.
But I hope he cuts all the money.
Well, that would be a perfectly legitimate exertion of federal power. Of course, we are a donor state, right? So we pay more. We pay more to the feds than we get back. So I'm not sure how that would, So which is always amazing to me, but it's true when you look at the numbers. Anyway, yeah, yeah, that's why I'm heading towards hopelessness, but I don't have any, there aren't any real answers. Yeah.
Yeah. A couple of weeks ago, I was come to the meeting here, and the mayor of Yuba City was up where you are, telling how great everything is. And so some of the people here in the audience challenged him on some of these salaries that people here in Yuba City are getting, administrators and stuff like that. And so his response to them was, well, these people are doing such a great job, they're overworked, and he says, if we don't give them these big salaries, we'll just have to hire 50 more people, so it's going to cost you that anyway. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, the thing of it is, it's really got to me. Oh, and to answer your question about the illegals in sanctuary cities, Mr. Governor Brown needs these people because they can outvote you. As soon as they get over here, they get a driver's license and they can vote. Well, who do you think they vote for? All liberal. Why? Can't blame them. All the programs they get. They come from Mexico with nothing, come over here 3 days later and you're on the system. Anyway, that's that question. That's why. The thing that gets me, though, is the mayor of Yuba City talked it all up, how great everything is, and, you know, these guys need this big money. And then another guy says, well, what are we going to do about the water problem here in Yuba City? You raised our rates. Well, he says, we can't lower the rates because, you know, we got to have so much water and this and that. Well, then he says, we're going to build all these new homes out here south of Yuba City. Well, if there's not enough water, where are they going to get the water for the homes? You know, okay, that's all that. So I picked up the newspaper the other day. Listen to this. Field Democrat, sorry, I get it. That's the only paper I get. Communist paper.
Used to be a freedom newspaper.
Yeah. Anyway, guess what I read in the paper? Board of Supervisors are going to get together and have a meeting, but we're going to have to raise taxes in Sutter County. We want to raise the sales tax so we can pay the retirement program for the city officials. And what do you think about that? Everything you're saying tonight is happening right here in Yuba City. And then let me tell you something else. One of the guys said, well, what's going on with Bridge Street from 99 on Bridge Street to Cooper? My wife said to me one day, we go to the Lutheran church every Sunday, and that's the route we go. And I said to my wife, there was a house there last week and it's gone. And a couple Sundays more, the house over there is gone. So some of the people ask me, what's happening between 99 and Cooper on Bridge Street? Oh, he says, the mayor's, we're going to beautify it. We're forcing these people, we're going to buy them out. He's got them all bought out already except one person that don't want to have their house destroyed, right? Anyway, if we're so broke, why are we buying these houses out? To put some palm trees in from Calusa to Cooper. We don't need, have you ever drove on that street? The chuck holes are so bad on Bridge Street. It's horrible.
Well,
But, you know, all I'm saying is, everything you said about the state of California and about the federal government, these people better wake up because it's happening right here. And they're going to raise your sales tax here, I don't know, 4 or 5 cents.
Yeah, it's a good point, because local governments do the same thing, just at a different scale, and I've seen it with a lot of local governments. And
Pulling dirty tricks.
oh wait, there's sir.
David, I've been to a lot of different meetings through the years, and they talk about disability pension. You understand what I say? They're like a highway patrolman retires, he retires with a regular pension, but somehow, like you said, if he's got a bowel problem, well, he gets a disability pension. So what's the advantage of that kind of a pension?
You get an extra year off, and 50% of your pension is protected from taxes. So you cut your tax bill in half forever and ever and ever.
Okay, so that goes on forever, right?
Forever.
I bet there's a lot of people in here that didn't know that.
Yeah, it's a good point. And 2/3 of the rank and file retire on disabilities. Now, I'm sorry, and almost 100% of the management. I say almost, but I think it's 100%. I just can't.
Yeah.
You know, there's maybe one guy out there who didn't take one. But the fact is, it's viewed as like an entitlement. And yeah, it's really wrong. And the pension, the boards that grant those things are dominated by union members, and in some communities, just they always get them, and the standards are really low, and it costs taxpayers a great deal of money. And there are all sorts of pension spiking gimmicks at the end of a career that a person could artificially boost the last year of their pay so that they get, you know, a massive increase for the rest of their lives. It all costs a heck of a lot of money, and it's not right. I mean, it's just wrong. Even if it's allowable, it's just wrong, and I think we should be able to say that.
Question here?
Oh, yes, sir.
I'm like-minded, but can you explain what happened with you, how your frame of mind changed toward the police brutality situation?
Yeah, I started reporting on it, and you know, first off, you try to get public records, and you get totally redacted records. You have police agencies just bald-faced lie. It's just extremely corrupt system that I ran into, and different police shootings that just seemed completely egregious, and trying to get the information was asinine. I kept finding one after another. I'm reporting on these cases of police shooting in ways that, you know, we understand if somebody's firing at them or they're in a genuinely dangerous situation, but we're finding them firing, and we see on a lot of these cases with the YouTube videos, and when you report on them, and you make a lot of calls, and you meet with the victims. When I worked at the Orange County Register, and you talk to neighbors, and you start interviewing people, and you're like, these guys are just lying, and then you see the video, and they're shooting someone in the back. And I found a case, uncovered a case where the police planted a weapon, you know, and there are all sorts of cases like that. Why wouldn't it be that way, right? Government is people with power will protect themselves, and then I found the code of silence, and the unions would pay the legal defenses for even the really most outrageous cases, right? I mean, I get it when it's a tough call or tough case, you have to protect the officer. But we're talking about cases where, the one case in Fullerton where the police officers are caught on video, the Kelly Thomas, putting on a rubber glove and saying, I'm gonna F you up. And then the official police report afterwards, they said, oh, they were in a fight for their lives. And I covered one after another of these things, and I dealt with, you know, I remember I've gotten some interesting threats, and I dealt with DAs who were covering these cases, and then the system is very hard. Prosecutors will very rarely prosecute, and it's very hard to fire these officers, and I found all these union protections that just made it impossible to get rid of the few bad actors. And what we find in this case in Santa Ana, the police officer who was involved in that disturbing case had been involved in quite a number of other costly settlements to the city, and it's my conclusion that the system protects the bad actors, and if we were able to get rid of the bad actors, I think you would have fewer bad actors, and you might have a little accountability. Every level of government, no matter how important, needs accountability and oversight, and you got to be able to get rid of bad apples. And you know, you get a lot of good police officers, but you got people who become police officers for the wrong reason. Just from reporting, that's all. And sir, you have
Yeah, in Kern County, 3 sheriff's department officers beat a man to death in a fetal position, unarmed, and of course they got off.
Yeah.
He's in the fetal position in OR, right?
Yeah.
And he's in the fetal position, and they literally beat him to death, and they got off.
Well, we see a lot of these kids. Some of these things are with these new no-knock raids. They go in, so if you're sitting there and all of a sudden someone busts, in a number of cases, someone busts down your door, what do? I'll go get the 20 gauge shotgun, which is my favorite, it's light and easy to use. And the person in black busting down your door, you think it's a criminal, and then, part of that is driven by the drug war and the increased militarization of our police, which is a very dangerous trend. And I remember when I was at the Union Tribune, when it was a school system police department bought one of those mini, not quite a tank, it had wheels, but a tank-like vehicle from the military. What the hell do they need that for? We see these cases increasingly of armed everything everywhere, and I don't care. I'm sick of it. I'm sick of when I go down to the American River to get on a canoe and they pat you down when I'm coming with my wife. I think I have beer hiding in here. That's what you're looking for. It should be a law that you have to have beer when you go paddling down here. My daughter, she and her boyfriend, they're photographers. They're out walking down the street and they get harassed by cops for what are you doing here? We're walking down the street taking pictures. There's something wrong with what's happening, right? And I get it we need police and certainly in some dangerous areas, and they have an important job to do, but why are we so apt to reach for a militaristic solution to everyday problems? I mean, kids misbehave. And I've got a friend of mine is a Republican guy, a black guy, grew up in a bad part of Los Angeles, and he tells harrowing stories of how he was treated just going about his life. And I know so many stories like that aren't just things that aren't made up. The people I know, and there's something wrong. I don't know why we become so militarized. I don't know why police behave as they do. The union issue is one thing, but there are other issues. I think the drug war, and I'm not advocating for drugs, but William F. Buckley years ago said the drug war is going to destroy our civil liberties. And we see it, right? With the asset forfeiture is all driven by the drug war. Imagine you do some little thing and there are a million laws, right? We're always in violation of some picayune regulation. I probably stepped on some endangered gnat right here. So the more laws there are, we're completely at the mercy of the government. And how's the government going to enforce things? They're going to send police officers. And anyway, that just got me ranting.
You were asking Pat down.
No, I'm exaggerating. I'm sorry. He was asking. He searched my little bucket, right, of sodas. No, they stand there at the American River there at Sacramento. They didn't physically touch me, but they looked in my little container. Looking for glass. And they looked us over, and they did that to everybody before you can go down to the river. It was just a little example. Right. Anywhere you go over to anything, right? Anymore, everybody's searching you. There's the assumption that we're all some sort of terrorists. Yeah.
You have touched on a number of great subjects this evening. Many years ago, when the high-speed rail program was just first getting started, they were trying to sell the high-speed rail idea. I got involved with it from an engineering standpoint. And at that time, Siemens, which is a German company, and they're running the whole show, as you know, they were going to give the engineers in the United States the contracts to do all the design work. Well, it didn't work out that way. But when the high-speed rail first came into present as an idea, it was called Fly High-Speed Rail. And the idea was it was going to compete with the airports. In other words, why have Southwest flying from San Francisco to Orange County, when you could take the high-speed rail that was going to be just as fast and a lot cheaper. Well, it didn't turn out that way either. And so the high-speed rail project itself has become, as you mentioned earlier, much more expensive and much more inconvenient than flying. I mean, who wants to take a high-speed rail that's going to take 3, maybe 4 hours to get down to Southern California, and then you're going to find local transportation to get you to the rest of the route from the train station. But when it started, they the ideas came up. Well, we'll connect it to the airports, because we got TSA there to check baggage and make sure the bombs don't get on the high-speed rail, and it'll compete with the airlines, because you can take an airline out of there, or you can take a high-speed rail. But that obviously didn't work out either. The state of California, TSA is a federal program, the state of California would have to pay the federal government to run their part of the program, and so that didn't sell. And so what's happened now, if you notice, over in the San Joaquin Valley, the railroad to no place has railroad stations now, and they never talk about TSA or how they're going to check security at the airports, but somehow they're going to have, in the state of California, their own TSA. So anyway, you've got great subjects. I could probably talk all night. I won't do that, but I just wanted to let you know that, some of these things have been going on for a long time, and the high-speed rail, I agree with you. I think it's going to crash into the mountains at the end of the valley.
Yeah, well, I think Willie Brown, in a Chronicle piece, said it best when he said, you can't worry about the cost of these things. You just have to start digging a big hole and make it so big that you can't turn back, essentially. And that's what they're doing. They're just trying to get something going.
Okay, we're gonna have 2 more short questions.
It's a question.
I can answer most of these questions for you. I'm 72 years old, and I lived here in Sutter County all my life. I'm a registered Republican, never have missed a day to vote. I've never missed one. But here's the thing. Your Governor Brown, the train is nothing but a legacy. That's going to be his big thing. And it's just like Obamacare. That's going to be Obama's legacy. He don't care if it's going to work or not. That's going to be his legacy. But here's what I want to tell you people here tonight. We do have a shining star, but we're making a big mistake. We're not supporting him. And that's President Trump. And all our universities now, the Republicans, the conservatives can't even speak. And what you said about the police is right. They stand back and they let these liberals, teamsters, muggers come into our universities and will not allow our people to speak.
Right, it's the whole free speech thing.
Okay, so what you got to do, what you people got to do, what I got to do, and the American people got to do, is support Trump. Here's what gets me. Here's what gets me. You got all these people demonstrating. We haven't got time to demonstrate because we got to work to pay the taxes so they can demonstrate, right? Well, here's what we need to do.
I think you should get paid to demonstrate from what I hear.
Some of them
You might be able to get
Okay, what we need to do is get big groups of people to demonstrate against them. And we need to start supporting Donald Trump, our president.
I support, frankly, I support Donald Trump when he's right and when he's promoting liberty, and that's when I support him. And when he doesn't, when he's promoting things that are antithetical to liberty, then I oppose him.
Well, hey, listen, that's your opinion.
Yeah, well,
That's your opinion. But my opinion is, the reason they let all these illegals come in, why not? They vote for the Democrats.
Well, sure.
And listen, President Trump won the popular vote. Well, he lost the popular vote in California because we got 10 million people that voted for Hillary Clinton. okay? But Donald Trump did win the popular vote if you took out the 10 million people that are here illegally. Now, I got Mexican friends, I work with them, good people, and they say the same thing. They want these illegals out of our country. They don't support these illegals. So what we gotta do is we gotta stand behind President Trump. He's our last hope. Amen. You know? And if President Trump hadn't if he was defeated, I farmed here, second generation. I'm an immigrant too, or my father is, he came from Europe. And he's a farmer. We took over his farm, we farmed. But I told my wife and I told my family, if Hillary Clinton becomes president of the United States, we're done. I was moving to Oregon or wherever, California. Well, I know, but it's not as bad. Oregon and Washington is not as bad as California. It's getting that way. I know when the mayor of Oregon, she said, we were talking about politics one day, and they asked her what she believed in, and her sex, and this and that. Well, she said, you know what? I'm bisexual. I can go either way. That's the mayor of Oregon. All I'm saying is, you better protect Trump. We better start protecting him.
Amen.
I was just saying,
One more short one.
I was just gonna say, I think
How do you follow up on that? How about, thanks for having me, appreciate it, and feel free to email me or anything.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. We're going to take a 5-minute break.